Hey everybody, welcome to the HL7 Open Source Tooling Series. Today we welcome Rob Scanlon from the MITRE Corporation to share information about FHIR Conformance Testing with MITRE's Inferno tool. And so without further ado, I'll turn it over to him.
Oh, thank you so much, Sandy. I'm really excited to be able to go over some of the work that my team has been doing. But first, I just wanted to quickly introduce myself. I'm Rob Scanlon. I'm a principal software engineer here at MITRE within the Open Health Solutions Department. And I've been focused on interoperability and open standards and specifically FHIR testing since about 2015. I'm the Inferno MITRE project lead, and I am a software engineer. I like building web applications and web APIs, and I have in the past worked in the financial services, defense domains, and now I'm obviously focused on healthcare. Today, I'm going to talk about the open source work we are doing in conformance testing with Inferno. I will provide an overview of Inferno itself. I am going to be focused on Inferno test kits, as I said, but I will also talk a little bit about the Inferno framework and Inferno platforms near the end. A few example Inferno test kits are listed here. I'll go through a couple of them. But if you go to our documentation site, inferno-framework.github.io, we do maintain a little bit of a registry of test kits that we are aware of. We've created many ourselves within the Inferno team, but there are also a handful of other test kits that external teams have created, and the idea is that we list those there. But looking through the list, we have tests for a whole bunch of different kinds of things. Obviously, that we have the certification criteria tests listed at the top there, but we have US core tests. We have testing around a couple of different OAuth related profiles, so Smart App Launch and UDAP. We have some international related tests, so IPA and IPS, and some tests also around payer data exchanges here in the US. So it's the whole DaVinci set of test kits. Now, if you want to try out a test kit, you can do one of two things. You can either download them as a standalone application and run them locally. As I mentioned, they are intended to be lightweight enough that you can run it on your own, any of these applications on your own laptop, a developer laptop, or stand them up internally in infrastructure within your own organization. Or you can try them out on a hosted platform, which is what I'll be doing as I walk through a demo of these. And inferno.healthit.gov, again, is the ONC hosted platform. All right, so that's a sort of brief overview of Inferno, just to get sort of level set on like what it does. Now I'm going to hop into a demo. I'm going to walk through a test kit and some of the resources online. That's probably the best way of just showing all the stuff that we are doing. Now, if you go to inferno.healthit.gov, that's a platform hosted by ONC. This is where it's really easy to run one of the many test kits that our team has written, and that is of relevance to ONC. However, just keep in mind, this doesn't necessarily host every test kit that might be out there. It just is the one that are sort of vetted by our team. Along the top, you'll see you can take a look at a list of test kits, and I'll go through that in a minute. But we also have news and updates, a good way to keep on track, like sort of see what updates are happening across the test kits that my team works on. We also have a list of events. One thing to just note, if you're interested in learning more about Inferno, is we do have monthly tech talks, which are the second Wednesday of every month, and we welcome people to hop on and listen in. And if they'd like to discuss really any aspect of Inferno, you're welcome to join. And we provide a little bit of information about this site and Inferno in general as well. But what I want to do is walk through some test kits with you, just to provide some information about, to give you an idea of how these test kits work. So if you click on the test kit link there on the top, you can see all the test kits that are hosted by this instance. this instance of a platform. On the top, there's the ONC certification G10 standardized API test kit. It was the first test kit that we made and is part of ONC's certification program as an improved test method. But we have, I think, over a dozen other test kits that you can run on this platform. We provide a description of what the test kit does. Usually they target a FHIR implementation guide. We describe when it was last updated, a version associated with each test kit. So the G10 standardized API test kit is really mature. It's version 6.0.1 by now. But if you see, a lot of the other test kits are much less mature and haven't even reached what we consider sort of version 1.0 yet. We also, really importantly, list what we consider a maturity level for the test kit themselves. Something that we found as we write tests is that we really need a lot of feedback with the tests themselves to make sure that we got everything right. And so as we create test kits, we start by marking them as a sort of low-level maturity, and then as more systems try it out, provide feedback, maybe identify any issues with our tests, we'll sort of move that up the maturity scale. So just keep that in mind. Something we found with writing tests and with some of the standards is that it's really possible, even for us, to misinterpret the spec or do things that might have some disagreement. The only really sort of way of figuring that is to have people try it, and then as we go along, we improve them. I'm going to quickly give a demo of the G10 standardized API test kit, just being the most mature of our test kits. And when you click on one of these links, you get an overview of what is in the test kit, an overall status, what it tests. We provide links to where you can provide feedback or how you can download the tests. And then on the right side is where we list the different test suites that might be in a test kit, and any options associated with those test suites. So in the case of ONC's G10 certification criteria, you actually have a choice of which version of implementation guides to support as part of their standards version adoption process. So our tests, the tests themselves are aware of what version you want to test against, and the tests adapt based on those versions. Now, the options here happen to do with versions of the specification, but you can also, the way test suites work is you can have really any kind of option as a sort of pre-configuration step for the test before you start running them. So I'm going to create a test session here. And this is really the main user interface for Inferno and Inferno test kits, the test suite interface. And really, this is the one sort of view where you kind of do just about all of the testing that you might want to do. On the left side, we provide a list of different tests that you can run individually. And then on the sort of the main section here, we provide an overview of the test suite itself. You can sort of browse through the different parts of the test. And for this test suite, the way it works really is it has a couple of scenarios around testing OAuth profiles as required by ONC certification program. And then it sort of continues on and acts as a FHIR client to try to download all data associated with a patient using the US core required interface. And then the way this set of tests works is then it tests the system ability to support transmitting large quantities of patient data over a standard interface. And then finally, sort of the wrap up, the set of tests, we have a number of additional tests at the bottom that sort of hit all these kinds of different odds and ends and aren't covered in sort of the main scenarios up above. To run a test, you click, run test over here. In this case, this first step here, it has to do with testing the ability for a system to support a standard authorization mechanism as defined by the Smart App Launch implementation guide. And you're provided with several inputs that you have to fill out in order for the Inferno set of tests to work. So in this case, Inferno acts as an OAuth client and asks the system under test to provide feedback, to provide authorization for Inferno as a client to access data. And because of that, you first have to register Inferno as a Smart App Launch app or an OAuth app. And you get a client ID and client secret and information associated with that. Then also you have to put in the FHIR endpoint to run against. Now, one thing that Inferno also provides within test suites usually are a list of presets to known reference servers or simulated servers, just so that you can sort of walk through all the tests. And it's really a useful way of seeing what the tests do. So instead of typing these in by myself, I'm just going to choose a preset, click run tests again, and now we have all the information preset to the system under test, which is a reference server that our team actually created. That reference server is also open source under the Inferno framework GitHub organization. So to start the test, you click submit, you start running. So now this set of tests actually is testing an OAuth workflow, which involves redirects back to the system under test. And so one of the things that Inferno supports is waiting for external actions to happen so the test can pause and wait for something to happen before tests resume. In this case, we're waiting for a OAuth launch to happen, essentially. If you click this link, you'll get sent to the system under test authorizations authorization screens, and sometimes it'll involve a patient picker. So this is actually what sort of the system under test is providing this interface. In this case, it's just our simple reference server. Here's a very basic authorization screen from our reference server. And then you click authorize, which redirects back to Inferno as the OAuth app, and it continues the process. So if you look within the test now, you'll see for the standalone patient app test, there are actually several steps within that happen all automatically. So in this case, we perform discovery, we do a launch, we check OpenID Connect, the ability for it to support OpenID Connect, token refreshes, and then we actually will take a bearer token that is provided to us and attempt to access different resources that we think we should have access to in order to support fully support the standard. So these are all obviously passing. It's for a system that we wrote and is designed to pass, but you can still get useful information from each step. You can see all the different kinds of requests that were made. Now, just to show you an example of what a failing test might look like, I'll run this second test, which is a step that we are checking to make sure that the system under test provides a patient user the ability to deny an app access to one or more resource types. So this is actually a requirement that comes from ONC itself, and it's part of the certification criterion. It's not a requirement necessarily within the Smart App Launch Guide itself, but it's a sort of layered on requirement that we test. And the reason why we test it is the scope of this test kit itself is for the certification criterion itself, which includes multiple FHIR implementation guides configured, sort of provide to be used in a way specified by ONC. So just to show you an example of failing tests, I'm going to run this test. and actually not follow the instructions. The instructions state that the tester needs to only authorize certain resource types. In this case, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to authorize all resource types again. And you can see some failures associated with that because the user was expected to deny certain resources in this case. So here we provide the error message, and to debug what happened, you can take a look at any of the requests that were made, or click on the About section to provide some more information about each one of those. In this case, we not only check to see what scopes are granted, but also try accessing the different resource types and are expecting certain statuses to be returned. That basically state that the system doesn't have access to those resources. So that's, in general, that's basically the actual, so how you use the tests themselves. It's pretty straightforward. I also just wanted to point out, while we're in this interface, we also support an API to run these tests. So we have this web API that's pretty easy to use, but we also have an API for actually running the tests in an automated way. So you can, so if you want, you can integrate these tests in whatever way you want. So you can, for example, stand up an instance of Inferno with these tests and have some sort of a continuous integration system trigger tests to run periodically or on every build or things like that. Also on the bottom here, very importantly, there are links to report any known issues. As I said, it's really important for when you create tests to get feedback from implementers to make sure that they're accurate and work well. So we really encourage people to submit any issues that they see. We just use GitHub issues to track that. We also have links to where you can download and run the tests themselves. So if you just click into the releases, you'll see the different sort of like way that you can just kind of download and run this. And yeah, so that's sort of the download link. So so overall, that is that's the Inferno test interface. I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about how you can author new test kits. So we provide tooling around building these test kits and really encourage anyone that's interested in trying to create conformance tests themselves to try out the tools we have around that. And then I'm going to also talk a little bit about some of the more advanced uses of Inferno around hosting and integrating with existing test kits. And then I'll leave some time at the end to answer questions. So go ahead and start throwing questions in there, and I'll start walking through them at the end of my talk. I also am going to do some live demos, so hopefully everything works out with that. So please take a look at that. I'm going to hop now back to the slide deck and just wanted to talk a little bit about a couple of more advanced uses of Inferno besides running conformance tests against systems that you yourself are developing. So first, I want to talk about authoring the Inferno test kits themselves. So Inferno does provide tests. So Inferno provides all of its tests around these test kits. Something to keep in mind: if a test kit doesn't exist for an implementation guide that you are interested in or you're developing against, then Inferno will be of limited value. We really are focusing on building testing around published implementation guides, because then that's sort of where we provide the most value around providing automated API tests. So that means if no test kit exists, it's like, well, Inferno might not be all that useful to you. However, we did create Inferno so that you can create your own test kits using the Inferno framework. That is sort of a first-class set of tooling within the Inferno ecosystem. It's not just for our team to use, it's for anyone who is interested in using. And really the process is pretty straightforward. Really the sort of 3 steps. First, you would set up a test kit application structure, either through the Inferno CLI or just by cloning a test kit template. You point your test kit to the machine readable packages that are published associated with your implementation guide. So that allows the integrated FHIR validation to load up all that machine readable data so that you don't, so to make sort of writing the tests easier. And then you actually create the tests themselves using using a Ruby DSL. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. That itself is probably a whole session on how to create tests, but I just wanted to point to you to the framework site itself. Where we provide documentation. So if you go to inferno-framework.github.io, click on documentation, we have a section here on creating test kits. And here's where we describe how you set up your local environment, the steps in general that you should use, and then provide some hints as far as how you debug tests themselves. Within the writing text section, that's actually where sort of the meat of the documentation here is, as far as how you create the tests. We provide some information on the structure and to sort of show how all the different parts are created. So within the interface itself, you saw test groups and tests, and so essentially you just when you're creating the test, you sort of mimic that structure here. As far as the metadata goes. So you describe the sort of title of the test and inputs that it has, and then you perform a set of steps within the test itself. A lot of times, those tests are really pretty simple. Will involve a request and some assertions associated with the request to see if the response makes sense. And so that's if you want to mimic a client to test a FHIR API. But we also have sort of the flip side as far as if you want to test FHIR clients for standing up endpoints, wait for clients to do something, and then be able to make some statement. So basically evaluate the requests that a client made against some criteria. So please, if you're interested, take a look at this documentation on how to create tests. And of course, all of our tests are open, our test kits are open source also. So a great way to sort of learn how this all works is just to take a look at our open source test kits, which is again, just usually under the Inferno framework GitHub repository. You can take a look at all the different test kits that exist. Just search for test kit. You'll see all the different ones that we have published, and you can sort of walk through to see how the Ruby DSL sort of gets turned into executable sort of tests. So one other thing that I wanted to bring up besides authoring Inferno tests is just if you're interested in hosting an Inferno platform. Now again, Inferno test kits really are always available to be downloaded and run locally on a developer machine or within within your own sort of hosted environment for your own use. However, just in practice, we found having a public host for tests that anybody can just type in a URL and start running tests is really a great way to encourage test usage. And so we provide Inferno on healthit.gov for hosting test kits. Right now, it's mostly test kits that the Inferno team themselves have written, but we are open if you're interested, if you've created your own test kit and want broader usage, to host it on this public platform, or you can host your own platform. So essentially, if you want something like Inferno on healthit.gov, maybe if you're involved in creating a certification program similar to ONC's Health IT certification program, and want a public resource that anybody can use to run tests that whatever organization you're a part of are interested in, you can create your own platform. And so in order to do that, it's actually pretty similar to creating a test kit. There is a little behind the slides, but there is an Inferno platform template repository. And what you do effectively is you clone the platform template repository, you reference the test kits that you've published, and then you have the ability to customize anything you want with the site itself. We just use the Jekyll static site creator to create all that content you've seen on Inferno and healthit.gov, and you're welcome to sort of change any part of that as you are interested. All right, so that was a really quick overall sort of whirlwind tour of Inferno. As I said, we're really focused on the test kits themselves, as that's, I think, the way that most users will interact with Inferno. But if you're interested in creating your own test kits, please do reach out. I think a really important part of open source is getting community involvement. It's one of the sort of benefits of working in open source. I would say in general, something that's just really, really valuable is provide, if you download and run a test kit, please provide feedback on that. You can do that through GitHub issues. And that's really important because it helps us gain some confidence in the quality of the tests and that we aren't over testing or under testing or anything like that. As I mentioned, please feel free to build your own test kits for other implementation guides. The team also hosts monthly Tech Talks, the second Wednesday at 1 p.m. If you go to inferno.healthit.gov and go to the events section, provide links for that. And then our team is also very active within FHIR Zulip. We have our own Inferno channel. And so please feel free to reach out to us through that. And with that, I'm going to start going through. It looks like we have several questions, so I'll just start from the top and start ending them. So first, we have a question. Are all test kits publicly accessible? So test kits themselves don't have to necessarily be publicly accessible. If you were to create your own test kit, it only is publicly accessible if you decide to put it somewhere public. The way the Inferno team itself works is oftentimes we will work on a test kit and in early stages keep it private, but the intent is to make them public, and also for our own team to publish them on inferno.healthit.gov so people can use them. But it's not an inherently, you don't have to have it. Test kits don't have to necessarily be public because they are their own applications, essentially. Another question here is, if a solution is built using an enterprise FHIR server, which is G10 certified, is that vendor's solution automatically compliant with G10 without having to certify their solution? So this is the type of question that is, I think, best answered by those at ONC's Health IT certification program. I don't speak officially for ONC when it comes to what does or doesn't sort of grandfather you into a certification. And yeah, so I recommend for that question to reach out to ONC through their feedback portal. And let's see, one more final question. Let's move to JavaScript land for interop. I love JavaScript, love JavaScript, and I definitely don't disagree with that. It's amazing with JavaScript. There's literally billions and billions of devices that could run JavaScript. It's awesome for interoperability. But we built up using Ruby and sort of have leaned into what Ruby is good at. for these sets of tests. And it looks like I very quickly ran through all the tests, and it looks like we're about at time. Please reach out to us. Really love these questions and would love to engage more with anybody that is interested here. That's really part of our jobs, is to make tools that are as useful as possible for the community. So please do reach out. And with that, I think we
Well
probably
done.
reach out. Wrap up.
Thank you so much, Rob. We really appreciate everything that you presented here today and that you were able to get through all of those questions. That's fantastic. For everyone's information, the recording to this session will be available from the main open source page on HL7's website, and you can also access Rob's slides there. Have a great day, everyone. We'll see you Friday.
Thanks for watching. If you found this helpful, give us a like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you won't miss the next one.